Are available on the league's website. Now let's get into today's program. Our speakers today are Stacey Decker and Molly Delaney. Stacey Decker is an accomplished public media executive with over 25 years of experience in local, regional, and national broadcasting markets. He currently serves as the general manager and CEO of Nebraska Public Media. Prior to returning to Nebraska, he served as the Senior Vice President of Innovation and Systems Strategy at the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. Molly Delaney has served as Chief Strategy Officer in Nebraska Public Media since May 2022. She leads membership, major and planned giving, business development, marketing, communications, and community engagement. So now I welcome Stacey and Molly.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
We're both delighted to be here and sincerely appreciate this opportunity to be able to talk to all of you. And we thank you for spending time with us today. What we're hoping is that through this conversation, we can go a little bit deeper beyond the headlines about what's happening with public media and especially with Nebraska public media. And we will. This will be a conversation starting off with Stacey and I, and then we're hoping that you will enter your questions in the chat so that we can continue it as a conversation with all of you. But before we jump into our conversation, we actually have a video that we'd like to show. And the video, I promise it's short, it's about 4 minutes. And I'm sure many of you have heard of Nebraska Public Media, probably think you have a good sense of what we do. But I'm going to challenge you when you're watching this video to think about something that you didn't know that we do. So we are trying to really cover, in this video, we try to cover everything, all of the services and resources that we provide for Nebraskans. So see if there's something you didn't know. And with that, we're going to let Jim take over the screen and show the video.
Okay, I'm trying and we'll see. Oops, hang on. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
All right, I will play the video.
I think I'm on silent.
Are you hearing sound? Or?
No.
Okay, hang on. Let me see if I can. It's paused for the moment. Let's see, sound. I don't know. Let's see.
Well, Jim, if you want another minute, we can start in the conversation and come back to this later.
Actually, let me try one thing here.
Okay.
Let's see if this sound works.
And Stacey and I have to apologize. We kind of handed this over to Jim because we've had trouble getting it to play correctly.
Okay, and it's still not. Hang on just a second. Let me pause it again. Oops, sorry. Okay, let me stop sharing for the moment. Let's see.
And Jim, if you want to try and allow me to share, and I can play it on this end too.
Okay. I think you should still be able to do the co-host. Whether or not, go ahead and try it on your end, and see if it works for you. And meanwhile, I'll look around.
For 70 years, Nebraska Public Media has connected communities across the state, provided trusted news and local journalism, and kept Nebraskans safe with vital public safety information. Nothing connects Nebraska communities more than sports, and Nebraska Public Media broadcasts more than 200 hours of sports each year. That includes the NSAA High School State Championships and collegiate sports like Husker Volleyball.
One of the greatest stories in sports is the impact that Nebraska Public Media has had on volleyball.
Going back when I was watching games on TV in small town Nebraska, and just the visibility of the athletes, and you could see them on TV, and only celebrities were on TV. The value of Nebraska Public Media has been so important to the success of the program.
Through the past year, Nebraska Public Media covered high school teams from more than 140 communities across the state during our NSAA coverage.
There are folks that they just simply can't get to Lincoln or Omaha or Kearney or any of the places that we have our championship events throughout the year. And for you guys to be able to put that on television, it keeps folks that maybe can't travel to those areas connected to their school, connected to their families in some cases, and connected to their community.
Nebraska Public Media continues to be a trusted source of news and information for Nebraskans. Each week, our radio broadcasts reach nearly 300,000 listeners, and we reach more than 1 million Nebraskans through our television signal. Nebraskans depend on us for national and international news, but perhaps most importantly, they depend on us for trusted local journalism. At a time when many news outlets are cutting back, we're serving even more Nebraskans in more ways. We've added reporters, we've upgraded transmitters, and this year we launched a news podcast called The Nebraska Update.
I love listening in the morning. I always listen up first to get the national news, and then go to the Nebraska Update for my Lincoln and Nebraska news, and that's a great way to start my morning.
Nebraska Public Media is the statewide dissemination point for all things emergency alert. So we've got a statewide network that's supported by state and local government and is delivering a signal across the state. And all the other stations are relaying our signal, and that makes us pretty important.
You can't have a safe public without the public knowing what's going on, when it's going on, and where it's going on. So Nebraska Public Media is a key player.
Severe weather in Nebraska is erratic. Dozens of tornado warnings were issued in 2025. And 2024 had the third highest on record. Now, new automated technology is increasing our ability to provide targeted emergency alerts to Nebraska communities on our FM radio stations.
So not only are we broadcasting emergency alerts, it's also being carried over web streams, either through YouTube TV or the PBS live linear system. So there's a lot of ways that we're pushing those alerts out, not just broadcast, but over the internet too.
Uniting the state, informing Nebraskans, and keeping citizens safe. Nebraska Public Media's services are trusted, valued, and essential.
Good job.
There we go.
So we're happy to be able to show that to all of you. I know I've been here for 4 years. I worked in public media in Illinois for 12 years. Thank you, Judy, for applauding. There's always something surprising about what we do. And so if you have a question, if you said, hey, I didn't know they did that, and you have a question about it, please bring it up in the Q&A. We'll be happy to try to get to it. Or you can put it in the chat and we can send it to you later, whatever. But thank you for sticking with us through that. And sorry for any technical difficulties that we had. So we're going to start the part where this is just a conversation with Stacey and I. And Stacey, I'd like to start out by you sharing what sets Nebraska Public Media apart, especially from other commercial media stations.
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for allowing us this opportunity. It's fun to talk to people about all the great things we do. You know, Nebraska Public Media, as mentioned, I've been in the public media system for quite a long time. The difference really between public media and commercial broadcasting is we're part of the community. You know, we're probably one of the best examples of a public-private partnership that exists. You know, we also provide national content, so there's a real nice blend of local and national. That's really the unique part of what public broadcasting can bring to a community, and it's what we bring here in Nebraska to the state of Nebraska. Also, you know, Nebraska is not only a rural community, but it's metro. And so we've got some good things happening in Nebraska at Nebraska Public Media right now to really combine the power of broadcasting in both the metro and rural communities, and not only the broadcasting piece, but digital. So things are changing a little bit. We'll talk about that today, but the real aspect of what public broadcasting brings to a community is that we're not driven by profit. We're here to serve the Nebraskans, and we're happy to do that.
Yeah, and I think so. One thing that has really changed in the decades that I have been alive is the access to media, and you know that you may question, like, why is local news so important when there are so, there's a plethora of outlets that are available for folks out there. So I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes kind of talking about, because of the nature of this group and the fact that it's the League of Women Voters, what robust local journalism does for democracy. And Jim, if we can pull up the PowerPoint again, I'd love to jump to that slide that outlines this a little bit. So if you can do that, that would be great. And there are three key things that we'll talk about. One is robust local journalism, according to research that's available out there, a lot of which comes through the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University. But what we're seeing, or what you can find information about, is that robust local journalism can increase voter turnout. It can lead to greater government accountability, and it can help with combating polarization that exists. And so the ways that it does that, so there's a correlation between voter turnout and consuming local journalism. It's not causation. Correlation doesn't imply causation, so we can't say that it causes it, but we can say that consuming local journalism is consistent with voting and active participation in local elections. So when you have local issues that are being covered in your area, then you're more inclined to feel that you should get out and vote because you see the relevance to your community. Local news also acts as a watchdog, and it can expose government misconduct and prevent corruption, which keeps municipal borrowing costs lower. And that's something I would not have even thought about, but is true. Without journalism, that official corruption tends to rise. And so then you have less accountability within your local government communities, and it can just increase those costs if nobody's watching it. Then combating polarization, I think that we can all agree that we live in a pretty polarized time right now. And one thing that robust local reporting does is that it focuses on issues rather than on national partisan rhetoric. And it helps to be able to bridge the divides and brings communities together to solve problems. And when local news is not available, then people really start relying on other sources of information, including social media, which can be a little bit on the dangerous side. And I just want to make 2 points about that. One thing, so there's this term in journalism called pink slime, and it's not necessarily referring to a cheap meat filler byproduct, but basically pink slime refers to low quality, algorithmically generated or partisan website and print materials that masquerade as legitimate local news outlets. So it's named after that pork byproduct or that meat byproduct, but it uses things like generic stock photography, AI generated images, and partisan content to really push political agendas. And this happens most in news deserts. Then the other point that I wanted to make is that Nebraska, in many ways, is in a news desert. So 9 Nebraska counties lack any local news organization, leaving roughly 43,000 residents living in complete news deserts. Statewide, 58% of counties have two or fewer full-time journalists. And with the decline of legacy newspapers and print facility closures and shrinking newsrooms, that has really created these geographic gaps, and Nebraska is included in that. So with that, Stacey, can you talk a little bit about what we do to nurture a healthy democracy?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the additional pieces of data that I think go along with that 9 Nebraska counties is the fact that Nebraska is 33rd in the nation with regard to broadband penetration. And as we all know, there's a big wave of digital transition that's taking place. So I like those stats a lot. From a governmental standpoint, I noticed in the chat somebody mentioned that we're more than just gavel-to-gavel coverage. Yes, we absolutely are. That said, I will say we're very, very proud of that gavel-to-gavel coverage. It's a very unique system. I think we've installed 26 cameras down at the Capitol. There's over 1,000 hours worth of content that's created down at the Capitol for people to view with one person back here on a joystick at our organization. So it's a really, really efficient system. But not only that, I mean, we, in a rural state where it's very important to get information out, we have journalists covering the entire state, not only the metro areas, as I said, but also the rural communities. We have a robust journalism team. We also, as I mentioned, the Capitol coverage is incredibly important. We also cover debates, which I think are really important in the democratic process. The other thing that's really important that we do that may not be a government solution, but it's a government service, and it was mentioned in the video, is emergency alerting and public safety. And I think that's also part of the government responsibility we have to the state of Nebraska here at Nebraska Public Media.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to go forward without also mentioning, so we have two people that cover the Capitol.
Oh, yeah.
So we have two reporters that are actually covering the Capitol, and that's pretty unusual.
Yep.
And of course, Fred Knapp being one of those, which we wouldn't want to talk to this group without at least mentioning Fred. And then Noelle Annanen, who is a new reporter who is covering the Capitol. So between the two of them, we offer a lot of coverage of that.
Fred has an outstanding history with this organization, and now we have Noelle, and I think Fred's trying to hand off a little of his knowledge and experience to Noelle as we speak. So it's a great combination between the two of them, and who doesn't love Fred? He's a fantastic reporter, and we really appreciate having him.
We've come to realize he has a pretty strong fan club.
Yeah, he does. So. What was the Fred Knapp bag, wasn't it?
Knapsack.
The knapsack.
We had it, yeah. So we, for a while, offered a thank you gift was a Fred knapsack. So moving on.
Yes.
So
I was going to say, I lost connection and I couldn't hear what you're saying. Am I close to the right?
You are on the correct slide. So if you go from this current slide, you're right on cue.
Okay. Well, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So, all right.
Right there.
There we go.
Perfect. All right. So you all might be aware that public media has been in the news quite a bit over the last year. So I just wanted to provide a recap of what has happened, what has transpired from last year to this year. So in May 1st, the president signed an executive order directing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, also known as CPB, to halt federal funding to PBS and NPR. It stopped both direct funding to PBS and NPR and restricted how local stations, including Nebraska Public Media, can use our federal funding. On June 3rd, a rescission memo was delivered to Congress proposing to claw back critical federal funding for public media stations nationwide, cutting funds already approved by Congress for the next 2 fiscal years. So that was back at the beginning of this fiscal year. And extended into 2 fiscal years. So for us, this included $3.8 million that were cut from our budget. And this was money that we were counting on, that we'd already budgeted that we would have. Then on July 18th, 2025, Congress passed a rescission package that eliminated $1.1 billion in previously approved federal funding for public media. As a result, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the nonprofit that has administered this investment since 1967, would no longer receive funding and would wind down operations effective October 1st, 2025. And then in January of 2026, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting voted to dissolve, which meant that it ended 58 years of federal support for public media, including NPR and PBS, and forcing local stations to rely on philanthropic aid and donations. So, Stacey, as someone who has worked with and for a number of public media stations and worked at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, how have these events affected the system?
Yeah, it was really unfortunate to watch what happened and what took place. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding, honestly. CPB did a lot of things for the system that that probably weren't well known. And honestly, that was their job, is to kind of be in the background. The loss of federal funding really eliminated the ability for CPB to help local stations. So what Congress did in what Congress did of ultimately eliminating that funding was got at the local stations. I think there was some desire, if I'm honest, to get at NPR and PBS. The truth be told is they got at the local stations. That's money that was coming to Nebraska to help support Nebraska public media. So it was devastating to us, of course, and so we've been working through a rebuilding process, and it's going to take some time. I'm happy to say, and we'll get into this in future slides, that the community's really stepped up. But a couple of areas that that probably aren't obvious to people in Nebraska and maybe across the country were the things that CPB really provided to states, like children's programming. There's a program that CPB administered to PBS to spend around $25 million to children's programming that paid for Sesame Street and some other programs that are the foundational things that the kids in this country, I think, really depend on to get a fair shake. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are in this country. You got an opportunity to get a good start in the learning process. The other one was, and I'll just use this as an example, during the Ukraine war, I was there, and CPB paid NPR for a couple reporters to go over to Ukraine and cover that war, to be on the ground and really expose what was taking place in that war. So CPB did a lot more for public media, I think, than people are aware of. It's more than just a relationship with PBS and NPR. It was truly a connection and an entity that served and worked with the local stations to provide funding and many other services that we are now working through a process of determining how we move forward without those services and without that help.
Yeah, so where do things stand right now?
Well, we're closed. You want to move into the legal aspect of it?
Yeah, and especially that recent ruling that I think confuses people some.
So there was, many of you maybe had seen, it was a brief, news cycles are fast. It was a brief mention in the news that a DC judge did find what the administration had done unconstitutional, and that closing or eliminating funding for CPB shouldn't have been permitted. However, it was. It doesn't change anything. The CPB's closed, the funding's been eliminated. It's a good ruling for potential opportunity in the future for us to fight for federal funding, but unfortunately, it really doesn't change anything for the local stations. So, as I said, we're in a rebuilding process, and we're really trying to figure out exactly what the future looks like without the mentorship and leadership and opportunities that CPB provided us.
Right. So, Jim, if you could go on to that next slide, and Stacey, could you talk a little bit about what that shift has meant kind of in practical terms?
Yeah, well, the federal loss for Nebraska public media, and Molly had mentioned it. You want to get into the percentages?
I'm going to ask Jim to go to the next
advanced slide.
Thanks. There we go.
So on the screen, you'll see the actual cuts that we've received over the course of the past year. As Molly mentioned, it's nearly $4 million in federal losses. We did take a small, and I couldn't be more thankful for the support that we get from the state. It's crucial that we continue to receive state funding. It's a big state, a lot of infrastructure, and it requires significant amount of funding. But we did take a 2.7% cut from the state. We want to do our part, which we've done. So in total, it's a loss of $4.2 million. That's not insignificant. It was approximately a little more than 16% of our budget.
Yeah, so as you can see, those are pretty staggering numbers. Can you talk a little bit about how Nebraska public media has been responding to those funding challenges?
Yeah, of course, we did a little belt tightening, which is what's required when you make those kinds of losses. But we've also, deployed strategies that were some in the can that we've been waiting to and hoping to deploy and working on deploying for a long time. And we're working on that. I think we'll get into some of those here in a minute. But we're also trying to improve, not improve. I think we do a really good job, but we're leaning into more the local connection to the community and showing our worth. I think it's very important to us that we are valued by the community, and I think we do that through the great products that we provide and other things. I think, as I mentioned, through public safety and other community service opportunities, we'll work more closely with federal, local, and other officials looking at grants. There's just a lot of different things that we're deploying right now to really expose funding opportunities for this organization so we can continue to move forward.
Yeah. So Jim, if we can go to the next slide. I'm curious how community support what role community support has played in all of this.
Molly and I have talked about this at great length. We are so thankful and proud of the effort that we've seen and the generosity we've seen by the community. And honestly, I can't thank Molly and her team enough. And I actually like you to share this slide a little bit. The information is fantastic. We haven't fixed it by any means, but I think the gap that we've covered is fantastic. And please,
yeah, sure. So
brag a little bit.
So, well, one thing that's hard here in the state of Nebraska. It's hard to brag. It's hard to tell your story. And so we've kind of been forced in that position to talk about why we're valuable.
Right.
And as Stacey said, he's been really out kind of going into communities, going into the legislature, talking to people, talking to leaders, talking to policymakers, and making sure that we are doing that. But the thing that I think has buoyed us in this entire time is the community support. And so we cannot overstate how that has impacted us, not just in helping to cover that funding gap, but also just knowing that what we're doing is important and valuable. So some kind of key things that I would like to share are so we're coming up to the end of our fiscal year. We just elaborated on that we had more than a $4 million gap to be able to fill in this year's budget. And because of community support, we've been able to bridge that gap by about 79% so far. So we're still coming to the end of our fiscal year. I don't think we're gonna quite reach it, but we've inched closer than we ever thought we would be able to. And the other thing that we've really seen is we've had an increase in membership. So I think that there are people out there using us as a resource that maybe had never made a gift before because it never seemed that critical. And so our membership has increased. It's gone up 16% in this last fiscal year. And we started at about 30,000 members at this time last year. And now we're up to 35,000 members. So from that perspective, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
However,
well, really quick, if I could say, I mean, the national news definitely helped in that process. I think we also told a really good story about what the impact was to Nebraska public media. Now, the challenge in this whole thing, just because I don't want to ignore the challenge that comes along with this, is sustaining this kind of relationship. I think, like I said, we provide a fantastic product, and it's clear people have spoken in regard to that. But now it's on us to make sure we sustain that relationship so that this kind of support continues, because federal funding is gone. It is not coming back from what I can tell. I think we're looking for new ways and relationships with leaders. And as Molly mentioned, I'm constantly in contact and having conversation with both federal and state delegation to talk about what the impact is, and hoping that we find new. And there are a couple programs that I've talked with Congressman Bacon and Flood's office about potentially leaning into, and Fisher's office for that matter, just recently. But they're not going to bring back CPB, and we still have to find a path forward. So sustaining these relationships, and again, very thankful for the community support. It's been incredible.
Right. And I would also say it's not that everyone has given up on any federal support, but we're not operating as if we're relying on it.
The effort's still there, for sure.
The effort's still there. The effort's still there. And if you feel so inclined to reach out and voice your support, you are certainly welcome to do that. But from our perspective, we're really operating in a new world.
Yeah,
right?
They're probably tired of hearing from me. So hearing from you would be just fine.
So I'd like to just focus a little bit. You are very much a glass half full kind of person, and we thank you for that. Stacey's been a great leader at this time because he is so positive and so focused on taking action. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what gives you confidence about the future? And Jim, if we can go to that next slide, that would be great.
So much. We, as Molly mentioned, we continue to invest in people, in services, We challenge ourselves all the time on how we can do things better, more efficiently. We're looking at digital services, which are things that we need to invest in because that's where audiences are moving. On your screen, you're seeing Omaha. We're going to get into that a little bit more about the acquisition of 101.9, which is a strategic initiative that, as we mentioned earlier, I've been here twice. I was here as the CTO 13 years ago. This was a strategic agenda that was part of that history, and so we'll talk about it. We just came out of strategic planning conversations about the next year. And there's a lot of pieces that I think we're going to put in place that gives me confidence that this organization's going to continue to strive forward and do good work and do it at in the most efficient and positive way for the state. It's such an asset. It was mentioned before that I worked in a lot of different public media organizations. I wouldn't say a lot. I've worked at 3. South Dakota, I was at WGBH in Boston, which is arguably one of the biggest stations in the country. And then back here in Nebraska for the second time. And I think if you've not lived in other states, it's easy to be optimistic about Nebraska. We do stuff so much more than most public broadcasters, and that's no kick to public broadcasting. It's just this place has been incredibly well taken care of. I'm only the 4th general manager in 70 years. No pressure. Don't mess it up. But it's just a really unique opportunity to be here, sharing this with the good people who work here and the wonderful people who have supported us over the course of the last 70 years and hopefully for 70 more.
Yeah, and I just want to talk specifically about a couple of investments. And one is at a time when, other news departments are being cut.
Yeah.
We've added people, and we're able, again, comparing to other public media stations or commercial stations, we're actually able to allow our reporters to be both general assignment and to have specialists in certain genres, like Jolie Peel, who covers education, and Aaron Bonderson, who reports on sports and gaming. And, we've both been at other stations, and what's happening here is not happening everywhere. So Nebraska should be very proud of what they have supported and built here at Nebraska Public Media. We're going to transition into, if Jim, if you want to show that last slide, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of more specifically about where things are. I'd like to also just mention again, it was in the video, but we have a new news podcast, Nebraska Update, which is just another service that we're offering to people. So you can get your news. You can sign up to get this news podcast. It drops about 5:30 in the morning. So you can get a jump on your local news for the day. It's great if you don't have time to be listening to the news over a long period of time. So
nice thing about it is it's a quick listen. It's 15 minutes maybe. Driving into work, I use it all the time, and it really is a quick, fast-paced hit of what's happening in local news and national for that matter. And she does a fantastic job. It's fun to listen to. It's good.
So, excuse me. So, you see on your screen, there's a QR code. So if you'd like to keep up kind of with what we're building next, what's going on with Nebraska Public Media, you can scan the QR code, or you can visit nebraskapublicmedia.org. And we encourage you to stay in touch with us, to see kind of what's happening, what's new, so that you can stay up to date with everything that's happening here. So the big thing on the horizon, and we're going to go this is my last question, I promise, and we're going to go right to the questions from you all. But we saw the 101.9, we saw the Omaha. This is your signal. I'm curious if you can tell us just a little bit more about that, including is that something just out of the blue? And I also am wondering, how did we use tax dollars to be able to pay for that?
No, we did not.
Okay, well, tell us more about
that. Omaha has been, as I mentioned, I was here before. I think we tried to look back in some of the history that's been a strategic initiative for Nebraska Public Media for close to 25 years. Many of you may know we're statewide on television, and we were just about statewide on radio, except for Omaha. Well, there's 800 to 1 million people in that, 800,000 to 1 million people in Omaha. That's a big chunk of the state, and not having that, and not having the good work that Fred Knapp and all the other reporters that they do every day, making its way into Omaha was really it was unfortunate. One, it just, we never got it completed. There was never an opportunity to do it. Well, shortly after I returned, we heard of an opportunity to purchase what was the KEG 101.9 and engaged in a negotiation. I think it was, it was a very kind and fair negotiation for the purchase of that station. And we then engaged the foundation. As I mentioned, this place has been incredibly well taken care of over 70 years. At some point across that 70 years, we started putting money in an endowment. And so we negotiated what we worked, I didn't negotiate, but we worked with the foundation to get them to commit the funds. And our governance structure is a little different than a lot of public media organizations. We have the foundation, of course, but we also have a commission, which is a governor appointed and bylaw appointed group of people who I report to. That commission really oversees the dollars that we get from the state and oversee the infrastructure, all the transmitters we have across this vast rural and metropolitan area. I then had to move the money from the foundation to the commission. They had to accept the money and then purchase the license. And then that transmitter, that license, that new station became an asset of the state, which becomes, it finishes our baseball card collection of transmitters across the state. And so there wasn't a dollar of tax money used. As I mentioned, it was really due to the philanthropic and vision that the foundation believed in us in accomplishing this effort, and really expanded our capability to reach this state from end to end. Now we're in Omaha all the way to Scotts Bluff. And so I'd seen a note or a comment that they're concerned about covering the rural states. I promise you, there is as much effort and emphasis being put on rural communities as there is on that effort in Omaha. And we now have a full statewide distribution on radio. And Nielsen just put a piece of data out that said basically Nielsen's they track all of the TV and radio listening and watching across the country, that radio is still the most utilized audio delivery in car listening. So it really gave us comfort that investment in Omaha was a smart one. And now as I said, we complete the set, and we're end to end from one end of the state to the other.
So I think we want to jump to Paula is going to feed us some questions.
Great.
And we'd love to hear from you.
Coming in. That's good.
We're really happy about the response. So Paula, kick us off.
Right. One of the first entries from Janet was actually a comment. NPM is a valuable resource covering state government, not just gavel-to-gavel coverage of the legislature, but the Nebraska Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. Of course, executive branch news is broadcast as well. So thank you, Janice, for pointing that out, and kudos.
Thank you, Janice.
You clearly watch.
Paula, do you have another question?
Yep.
Okay. There's somebody thinking that they get to see Downton Abbey again. So good.
I was at just a quick story. I was at WGBH when Downton Abbey was kind of launched, and it was a fun place to be during that time. That was probably one of the most popular shows that public broadcasting has ever aired. So a little history there. It was a fun to be part of it.
Okay. And you've already mentioned this one. I'm concerned about Western Nebraska and what NPM provides as it relates to news and weather. Has that been impacted because of funding, or will you be looking to expand?
As Molly mentioned, we've made some additional investments in journalism and journalists. We have a dozen journalists across the state. I was asked this question a couple days ago while I was talking to a few people as well. The one thing that we really depend on is partnerships, and we have, of course, local partnerships with people like Flatwater and with the Examiner, and we also have Harvest Media, which we do some partnerships with. So I think, there's only so much money we can spend on journalists. I think I said I'd like to have 30 people out there, but we just can't afford that. And so we have to lean into partnerships to solve some of these problems. So to answer your question, that was a long way of saying it's absolutely it's a priority of ours. We're always looking for ways to solve it. Nancy Finken, who's head of content, has conversations with some of these small newspapers across the state to help support that partnership effort.
So Stacey, one thing that I just want to point out, because you and I were actually out in North Platte when the wildfires were going on.
right.
And I think that the wildfire coverage is a really good example of how we can still be present. We can be present as in different places across the state. And we had people that we were talking to there who said it felt like that we really had boots on the ground there, and that
We did have.
and we did, and it didn't. It felt like that they were really covering their community, like it really reflected their community. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely, we did. And I know part of that statement was also about public safety. We have regionalized a lot of the alerts on radio. We're having a conversation here in about a month about how we might apply some technology to the television side to make it more specific to your community. Right now on television, if an alert goes out, they hear it in Omaha all the way to Scotts Bluff on television, and we're looking at ways. It's expensive, right? So we're trying to be very, very careful, but public safety is a thing. Clearly, with the wildfires and the number of tornadoes, as you saw in that video, that are happening, we're trying to be good at it.
So, Paula,
Thank you.
do you have another question?
Okay, a few more. Another thank you. Enjoy the Nebraska stories. Thank you for this program. And then here's a question from Steve. How do you get large donations without unacceptable strings attached?
Well, I'll take that one, but
Yes,
you can
please.
certainly chime in. So we have a very strong firewall that whenever we are bringing donations in, that is how we recognize them, how we accept the money. All of that is very scrutinized before that gift is accepted. And so I can say in my 4 years here, we've been very fortunate that people understand that, and that we serve, the public first. And so there isn't a whole lot of expectation that anyone will have any control over anything that goes on our air. And even if they did, if that was a problem, we would not accept that gift. However, if you're interested in making a large gift, you can reach out to me and I can talk you through it.
Yeah, it's really important. I think I saw another question that might be coming up about our governance structure with regard to the commission, and that being a governor-appointed commission. I'm again the fourth general manager, and I'm so proud of the governance structure that had been established to ensure that there is no political interference with Nebraska Public Media. We are also funded, just a small portion of us, by the university, and there's also safeguards in place so that the university can't put their thumb on the scale. This organization has been firewalled off away from any political influence and away from any influence on behalf of the university. Molly had mentioned myself, most of the staff, there's a firewall between us and journalism. Nancy Finken, who runs our content area, and the journalism department run, that independent. I never call down and say you can't talk about that. You can't. This is a journalism ethics oriented organization that never happens, and I'm proud of that. I would never, and there are safeguards in place to make sure that others never put their thumb on the scale when it comes to journalism.
And I also, so just an example of this, before we actually came on the call, Judy, who is on the call from the League of Women Voters, was asking, like, how could we get Fred Knapp to appear? And it's not, you cannot go through me, you cannot go through Stacey, it has to go through Nancy Finken, who's our chief content officer. And then she navigates that entire process.
We're happy to make that connection for you, of course.
But
it's like debates, for example. I don't call Nancy and say we're doing these debates. Never. That's something that Nancy takes care of, and we do it, in working with those offices. But I'm not involved in those kinds of day-to-day decisions, and that's the way it should be.
Okay, thank you. From Jean, if you can't fill the gap in funding, what could be impacted?
Well, I think that is do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just be transparent. The state does a wonderful job of helping us with the infrastructure. And if you can imagine, we couldn't afford to replace that infrastructure today. Just say we were starting public media today. There's 23 or 4 big towers across this state that serve the state. You couldn't build them for what they built. So maintaining that stuff is really important. our biggest expense is people. And so we're always, always trying to be efficient. So many people in this organization wear many, many hats, but the true impact will likely be people. Ultimately, what happens in that regard is services would decline. I am trying with everything I have to avoid that because this organization runs very, very efficient the way it is. But the other tool we have is through attrition. And of course, this is a wonderful place to work. We have a lot of longstanding employees, and as they retire, then we determine whether or not we replace them, or if we shift the duties, or use technology in some regard to replace some of what they may have done. In the content creation space, though, it's such a hard area to use technology to replace that. I'm not into using AI to do content creation. It's something we're talking about with regard to AI on how we might offset some of those expenses, but that's a long way out. And we're talking about it every day. That's just a reality and a fact.
And you did bring up, I mean, I'm really proud of the fact that in this year, when many other public media stations have faced layoffs and cuts of programming, we've not done that. We've not had to do that yet.
We've invested through them, right? I think that we also have an opportunity, as Molly's pointing out, that there are opportunities in the state for us to invest into, and hopefully, again, receive the big hug from the community that we've gotten for doing additional work, and because of that, we'll be better and more sustainable. And I think that's we're here to earn our keep, and we're here to solve problems for the state. And in both of those things, I think if we do them right and do them well, we'll continue to receive the financial feedback and support from the state that we get.
Okay, thank you. I believe you pretty much answered Judy's question about avoiding political pressure. So I'll move on to the next one from Bob. I'm wondering why weekend programming, radio, not quite sure what this means, school, is being realigned beginning later this month.
So the addition of Omaha is allowing us to make some changes and encouraging some changes in the schedule. Data is a big part of what we do, and more than ever, we look at the data that we receive to determine whether or not we're doing a good job. So part of that data is audience, but part of that data is also determined by companies that show us, whether people are listening or not. And so some of the adjustments may be done to support a higher listenership, to support viewer and listener input. So the adjustments, again, made by Nancy Finken and that team, are being done so that we are utilized to the most and fullest potential, actually. And so it's not always popular to make changes. I get that. I fully understand.
You can't move people's cheese.
Yeah, you can't move people's cheese, and unfortunately, it's required at some point for us to continue to be the most resilient, and it's really important we continue to be a valuable resource. And if nobody's listening or watching, or 2 people are, and we could get 50, we're going to go for the 50. We need people. We need people to be successful.
Can I just add, because I think the way that you said it to begin with implies a little bit that Omaha is the cause for that, and that's not the case. Omaha was an opportunity to make these changes that we were thinking about otherwise.
That's right.
Thank you. Got a kudo from Mary, who says that What If is a fun program. Thank
Mike
you.
Tobias does a great job. Yep, we agree.
And let's see, I'm jumping around here. And Bob clarified his message now from has anyone called in with ideas for journalists? I'm not quite sure what that question is. We'll go on to the next one.
We get people that reach out to us that are journalists, and have been journalists in this state, that are happy to put their resume in. We've had a couple new job openings. We look at resumes all the time. I wish we could hire them all, but we can't. And so again, we go through a process there. But yes, we have people that call and offer their services and whatnot. But there's a process.
All right, next. How does NPM focus on news reporting neutrality? Are you okay with being labeled as center left?
Boy, I listen all the time, and I'm going to expose myself. I'm center. I would challenge. I think we do a really good job of showing both sides of the aisle. Again, it's hard to be perfect, but I would challenge that one. I think we do a really good job of being fair. Again, honest, right? We do honest reporting, and I'm proud of that. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that one. I know there's, over the years I've been involved for 30 years, and there are labels that are applied, and sometimes we don't get it right. And more of that I think is at the national level than the local level. But
Well, and yeah, so both of us have worked at
yeah,
this station and other stations, and while we get that question a lot, and I think it's, all in kind of your own perspective, and you tend to hear things that kind of skew toward what your own point of view
yeah.
is. But I have never, in the public media stations that I worked at, I've never felt that we weren't being fair or that we were not showing open to both sides of a story. And um, yeah, I don't want to say, well, I just don't see it, but I think there is an element of that is true. Like we internally are seeing how there are strong efforts to prevent that from happening.
And actually, as I think through the question, it asks, are you comfortable with being labeled center left? No, I'm not. I'm not comfortable with that. I want to strive for this organization to be fair all the time, and I think that's right down, right down the middle. So we always work every day to make sure that we do a good job.
I had a question about Nancy's role as a de facto news director.
Yeah, we hire a news director, and of course, I mean it's a paid position, so that they're not indentured, so they can come and go if they like. And so occasionally we've lost a news director since I've been here. There was an interim where Nancy was de facto news director because we didn't have one, but of course that's done in cooperation with the other journalists that are on the team. So we're careful to make sure that during those times we navigate that well. But we have had her de facto news director at one point in time since I've been here. Yes.
Another thank you from Phyllis.
You're welcome, Phyllis.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Some reason my thing doesn't want to scroll. I don't know what my
I think I saw one about the vote, the federal vote.
Okay. I'm excited for the expansion to Omaha with NPM on the radio. I've read about the arrangement of programming with respect to KIOS and KVNO. Could you elaborate?
So KIOS and KVNO are both public radio organizations. They also took federal funding cuts. They're running their businesses the way we have partnerships with them when they work, but we are not affiliated with those organizations in any way. We feel like we're coming into the community to offer something different, not compete necessarily. So I think they're going to plan to continue, and we're just a new addition, and we're gonna, we talked about earlier. One thing we very fortunate to have a couple of journalists on the ground. We want to be really hyper local and really serve the Omaha community. So I think we feel like our product will be a little bit different, and we hope people enjoy it.
Next question. What service do you use to measure viewership and listenership?
That's changing all the time, but the big one is Nielsen, and we just talked about this actually the other day. There's so much social listening that we do now too, because social media is such a place, and Reddit's a place that we listen to see what people are commenting on. It doesn't drive every decision we make, but it helps. We want to know what the users of our product think of it, and we do take that into account as we make changes across the strategy of this organization.
That's a great question, by the way.
Yeah, because it's true. There's a lot more today than there used to be. When I started in television and radio, Nielsen was it. Now Nielsen's one of many. And on top of it, we've got so much digital product out there now in digital content, those services like YouTube provides us data back, and Facebook provides us data back, and TikTok, we don't do TikTok, but Instagram provides us data back. So we use all those sources really to kind of help us make decisions.
And this
Harder,
appears to be the last question so far. I would like to know how our congressional delegation voted on the cuts to NPR and PBS. League of Women Voters would have the power to contact our representatives. Thanks.
Well, unfortunately, I will say that all of our delegation voted in favor of cutting those funds. But fortunately, I had a very much an open line of communication with the House members. I talked with both Congressman Bacon and Congressman Flood the day before and the day of the vote. They were very transparent and honest with me. I think Congressman Bacon and Congressman Flood, for that matter, continue to be open to conversation about finding new funding sources. But to answer your question, they both and all voted in favor of rescinding the funding and ending funding for public media. That's just the facts.
Okay, I'm looking to see if there's any more questions have popped up. I don't see any. I'll give people a few minutes, and I'll just have some other announcements and see if there's some last minute questions. If you're inspired to make a difference in our democracy, consider joining our Lincoln-Lancaster County League. If you are not already a member, you can visit our website at lincolnleague.org. And then there will be no Lunch and Learn in July as we are having a summer break. Lunch and Learn will resume August 6th with a presentation on Roots of Justice, a history of race and racism in Nebraska. Okay. I do see one more question for league members, and that's for us to sort of mull over. Does the league have a position on government funding of public media? So that's for us to consider as we take away from this discussion. So, Stacey, and do we have any more comments here, Molly, before we close?
I'd like to just really end on a positive note, and that's to say that we have just the outpouring of support for Nebraska public media in particular has been so strong, and even I believe that even that our representation in Congress supported us strongly in terms of they believe in what we're doing and they think we do an excellent job of doing it. But it's, yeah. So there's no, we felt pretty fully supported through that process.
Yeah, like I said, there was a very honest exchange, and there continues to be dialogue between myself and those offices, and I'm happy for that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be in DC next week, and I'm going to stop and visit them. So yeah, we continue to make the case for our organization and others in the country with regard to public media. I can't thank you enough. These opportunities to really tell our story they're vital, and I think they're way better than when we get a news article that goes out and we get a snippet of information that goes out to people. These kinds of exchanges and opportunities give us the ability to really talk about the good work we're doing. I'm so proud of the staff, of course, and thankful for the community and the support they've given us. So our foundation and board have been fantastic through this process. I think there's a lot of trust between us and our governing bodies, and we're going to fight hard every day to make sure that we continue to serve the state of Nebraska in the best way we possibly can.
Okay, thank you again. We really appreciate Stacey and Molly sharing all of this information with us and all the great questions we had from our listeners. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you to our speakers, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.